Welcome to the Comedy Reset Spotlight. This is the place to be if you want to hear from some of the most innovative and exciting comedy creators from around the globe. On this podcast, you'll hear from a variety of guests who are pushing the boundaries of what comedy can be. If you're looking for fresh perspectives and new ideas, this is the podcast for you.
Episode 27. Houston, Texas comedian, Roxie Monique.
When did you first start doing stand-up comedy?
I started comedy. It's been, my first stand-up was in the backyard of my cousin's place. That was like 8 months ago. And it was a bunch of friends and family, which is really nice. But yeah, I started comedy like 8 months ago.
What made you want to become a stand-up comedian?
Well, all my life I have been like funny with my friends and my family. So prior to me becoming a comedian, I just feel like I had so much stuff to talk about. My story, I feel like no one was at a point in comedy where they were talking about like living with two moms versus like some comedians grew up with one parent, some of them grew up with both, so I just feel like no one was representing the children that had to, grow up with two-parent households in the 90s. So after a big breakup I had it lasted like 17 years and I just had enough. So I was like, I got things to talk about. And my mom always was like, you miss your calling. You need to try comedy. That's just your thing. You need to do that. So I started doing it, and actually it's been a success. I mean, I do my open mics and things of that nature and shows like that. Not getting paid yet, but that is in the near future. But yeah, I just feel like my story needs to be told about growing up with two moms in the 90s. So,
Who were some of your influences?
I mean, there are so many. My influence was Cheryl Underwood. Also, it was some more. I love them. Also, any of the lady comics that I can't think of right now. My apologies. But also, as far as the men-wise, Richard Pryor, Red Fox. I love Bill Bellamy. Adi Salik. I love Dion Cole, Martin. I mean, it's just so many, but my major influence will be Mama Mabel. I mean, as far as being a female in comedy, that'll be my go-to. Also, I do love Chelsea Handler as well. She's cool as shit. So,
What was your first time on stage like?
well, my first time on stage, I called it my coming out. So my first time on stage, my cousin has like a big backyard and he like built his mama patio from like the ground up and it's big, nice deck. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do my show right there. So I did an open mic in the backyard of my cousin's new porch that he built. We had a tip jar out. It says, leave your 2 cents. And if I made you holla, leave $1. So I got like $5. So that was pretty cool. But majority was most of my family that came out. So my first appearance just coming out was to my family to get comfortable. And my first show in front of people I didn't know, I bombed. Well, not really. I didn't bomb. I think that was the second show. But like the first show was at the Box and I did really good. And that was like my actually first show at the Box, the secret group, in front of a audience that I wasn't aware of.
What's your favorite joke?
My favorite joke, personally, so my favorite joke is, have anyone grew up in a two-parent household? Some people say yes, some people say no. And I come out and say I did, because someone mama was always at my house.
What's the worst heckler experience you've ever had?
Well, I had a show and I invited a couple of my friends. And so I wasn't on stage, but one of my fellow comedians was on stage. And he was a bigger dude. And so my friend that I invited was like totally lit. And so he was like being a huge heckler. Like he was on the phone talking about, baby, what you doing? And so since my fellow comedian was kind of like bigger, he told him, that's why your daddy got diabetes and so was you. So will you have diabetes? Which I thought was kind of hilarious due to the circumstances. But yeah, he was just not feeling none in the crowd. And when I got up, of course, I had to rag on him because he looked at like the pub from Men in Black. So yeah, that was a heckler. Also, my cousin heckled me in my first show. So that was the experience.
What's the best gig you've ever had?
The best gig I have ever had was like 3 weeks ago. I did a show. It was a great crowd, a good show up. As far as gigs, I'm really getting into learning more on how to get gigs that pay, but still maintain a 9 to 5 off on weekends. But most of the majority of the gigs, like paying gigs, like mostly is like in Austin or like going towards the border. Unfortunately, it's not really a lot of gig spots here in Houston, which I don't understand why, but as far as my gigs wise, I have been improving. So my best gig I had was 3 weeks ago, and it was really live.
What's the worst gig you've ever had?
Wow. So the worst gig I ever had, I believe this was like my fourth time doing comedy. And it was at like an open mic. But the open mic has variety, like R&B, and people come up there and sing and do their little talent or whatnot. So this is like my first big crowd amongst people I don't know. Like the outcome was really great. I bombed really bad. I was really hella nervous, like hella nervous. I was so nervous. So as soon as I got up on the mic, first off, you really couldn't see me because it was like a dark club type situation. They had the fog going, so it was getting hot, and I was already nervous. You know what I'm saying? And the alcohol, it was kicking in, but it wasn't kicking in, but it had me sweating. So I kind of like freezed up and forgot half of my jokes. And it was just so bad to the point where I just stopped it really early because I just didn't want to commit suicide on stage.
How do you deal with stage fright?
So with stage fright, how do I deal with it? So I have a thing when I know I'm about to go on stage and I get really nervous. I do a little scream to the point where everybody look at me like, what the hell is wrong with you? But I do it before I get to the place. And like when I go to the bathroom, so I'll be like, ah! So that is my like relief for my anxiety of coming off stage. So once I do that, that's like my ritual. Like I gotta, ah! And then like I'm ready to go. Or I just be like, hey, little person, I need you to get out of my head. Or I just, go with the flow and the energy. Sometimes it's different crowds. But once people understand that they're there to laugh, the energy is very great. But I tend to scream right before. And I get on stage or even going to the place because my anxiety. And so once then my fright is gone. Like it's not there anymore. Once I get that mic, it's over.
What was the most unexpected response you've ever gotten to one of your jokes?
Well, I had a joke that asked, anybody do they have health insurance? And the crowd was like, no. And I was like, well, I guess that Obamacare didn't kick in.
How do you prepare for a show?
So that is a learning process for me, but I do have like 3 or 4 notebooks. I have jokes that people have not heard, that I have not said, or jokes that I have said probably at a couple of places, but not randomly. I just have like a bunch of papers everywhere, jokes that I keep in my purse. I have jokes everywhere in my house. My biggest thing right now, as far as preparing for my show, is what I want to learn is how to make everything coincide. I have a lot of people that I require a response from, and so they major responses like, hey, look, you need to learn how to blend in your jokes, or don't cut off the story really short, because it gets interesting and then you move on to something else. So when I have a show, like I have a show on January 28th. So as of right now, I go through my tablets that I have and I get premises of jokes that no one probably have never heard or I never did before. And then I just write them down from there. I have a scrapbook that I write them down in, and then my final, I write them in another thing. So I'm like writing them like 5 times, because I add stuff, I take some stuff out, I think about some stuff, and I write it down. Or when I write it down, after I, rewrote it, then something else come to my head, and I try to write it down, what I just thought, and so it doesn't quite go together, but it do. So right now, as I prepare for a show, I like to do it like 2 or 3 weeks early, just in case something happened or it's something I want to talk about and I get off track. So I pretty much write down all my jokes, and then my final jokes, I write it down on a separate piece of paper, and then I just go over it. I don't want to rehearse it too much because I don't want to sound like it's scripted. So I do, rehearse it. If I don't go to open mic, I just do it at home. So that's how I get prepared for a show.
What's the best advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy?
The best advice was I entered a contest. It was like at this drag bar, and it was really cool, but I don't understand how drag is a talent if you just lip singing, but that's neither here or there. So they had judges on the panel. Some of them was drags, some of them was like real stand-up comedians. And my best advice that I was given was keep doing what you're doing. You're funny, but find your niche. Also, it's like we want to hear more of your personal life. I really don't tap in as much as like personal. I always talk about other current events and mix a little personal in there. But the best advice was, look, you're funny, keep going, do what you need to do. It's a couple of things that you need to work on, but you got it. Just keep working at it.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy?
The worst advice given about stand-up comedy is what you doing. You think you're going to make it all the way. I mean, it varies. People can either like you or they don't. As far as the worst advice, to be honest, I really haven't. I feel like the worst advice to me in comedy, if no one laughs. That's the worst. I believe if you're working on your material and you go through your skit and no one laughs and you don't get a laugh or a heckler or chuck, I think that's the worst. As far as advice, stuff that I see on YouTube, about like, hey, look, this comedy game is really raw. You got to be like, comedy has to be your spouse, and if you have a spouse, then it's not gonna work because this way, if you doing comedy, fuck your family and friends and spouses. This your new man. So I think the worst advice that I've heard is like, you don't have room for a family life, which I don't think that's possible because majority of comics these days are more family oriented. But personal advice is that I've gotten was, find your niche, which that's not really worse, but it was just like, find your niche, find what you gonna do and what you gonna talk about, because you all over the place. I get that a lot from my sister. She said be all over the place. But other than that, I mean, as far as people approaching me or people I did stand up in front of, most of them is like, oh my God, you're cool. I like what you said. Um, yeah.
What would you say is the biggest misconception about stand-up comedy?
The most misconception, I believe, is since we are living in an era of like further technology, well, which we really are behind on the technologies, just watered down technology we have. But the misconception is that since it's a lot of social media platforms, I believe that majority of the people who are up and coming comedians, they're not really like hitting the stage as much. And I believe in order to, have a name or a brand for yourself, you have to hit that stage. I mean, social media is cool. It's fine to put your face in front of a camera or anything like that, but that's just on that realm of that social platform, but actually doing it. So, and another misconception is it's not easy. I mean, people make it seem like, oh, I get discovered and I can do this, but it's actually really not that easy. So I think the misconception was like, it for that era is like, oh, okay, where you can somebody acknowledge you at this point of time, but it does take time. So I think the misleading part is about, if you're gonna become, a celebrity as fast. Also, the misconception sometimes is like you really don't have a guide. The only guide is looking at other comedians, but it's like, do you want to look at other comedians? Because you might not find your style of comedy if you're looking at other comedians do stand up. Even though you're trying to, see how they're comfortable with the mic, different hand gestures and how the crowd reacts. Sometimes it's like, it's not, you're not really learning, but like I said, it's not like a guide to comedy. You just gotta feel it in your soul. So sometimes the misconception comes from, people saying you can, if you do this in a certain amount of time, you'll get founded. Or if you just, sit here and post videos all day, and I can't do that because I have a real job. And I just rather be on stage. I'd rather be on stage. I'd rather hit different venues when it comes to comedy. But as the misconception is like, there's no guide. It's no guide. There's no Google to this. And if you do get Google, it's going to take you all over the place. But majorly data YouTube, that's where it's going to take you. But it's really like no actually guide. It's not like you can get good knowledge from certain things, but it's not like you're going to get like blow up like right away, so.
What do you believe is the key to success in stand-up comedy?
Being consistent, putting yourself out there more, linking up with fellow comedians. Just continue to put yourself out there. Just be relevant to what's going on, either it's just personal or what's going on in the world. I believe your key to success, and then also learning the business as well, back and front. How do you be successful in this industry? What do you need to do? How do you need to link up with certain people in order to be successful in this industry? And then also learn the back of the industry, not just the front part of it. So with being successful, I believe you just got to be consistent, persistent, always on your stick, basically. Putting yourself out there more, even if you don't do social platforms. Like, I don't do social platforms, but I do have platforms, but I don't post a lot of videos and things of that nature. My platforms are funny, but I don't post a lot. But I feel like I'll be more successful on stage versus the metaverse. So, but it's a good thing to try different things. But as far as being successful, you just got to be consistent and persistent and constantly, out there on the stage. My goal this year is hitting 50 states, 50 different open mics, but I have a 9 to 5. So if I had a laptop, I would do it. But other than that, it's just about being consistent and being open to learn different things in the comedy industry. And, take everybody knowledge or little nugget that they give you. Sometimes it may be criticism, sometimes it might not, but sometimes it will help you in the long run.
What do you think is the biggest obstacle that stand-up comedians face?
For one, the council culture. And then also another big obstacle is just actually getting on the stage and actually doing your material from front to back. Getting up on that stage, facing that fear is the biggest obstacle you can ever achieve in being in the comedy industry. Also, like I said, the cancel culture. And, not saying make your jokes like where, it's sensitive to other people, but still be considerate, which I don't think you should. But hey, we're living in a time these days where, hey, everything can be canceled. But the biggest obstacle, I think, is the cancel culture. I believe everybody is sensitive these days. And I mean, the biggest one you face is getting on that stage. That is the most major obstacle there is in the comedy industry.
What do you think sets stand-up comedy apart from other forms of comedy?
Well, when you look at stand up, I believe what sets the stand up comedy apart is because you're actually being vulnerable to the crowd. You're actually expressing yourself. They can actually see your body language and hear your tone and your voice, the way you do your stories, your monologues. If you have personations, they can see that on stage. As far as other comedy wise, like I mentioned, the social platforms, you really see that person, but you're not really feeling that person because you can't feel or see their body language. You can only see their face or if they're doing other videos. But as far as being on that stage as a live person, you're vulnerable. The crowd can see when you're not confident in that joke, or they can see and know like, hey, that's a good joke and it's funny. So, and they can tell by your body language as well. So being on stage is the best because you get to interact with the crowd versus being on a social platform and all you have is likes and comments.
What are the benefits of stand-up comedy?
Potentially getting better gigs. You meet great creative beings just like yourself, that's striving for the same thing that you're striving from. Also, just meeting different people, going to different cities and states, putting yourself out there, and just being you. And then also being in the industry, making money from gigs, which I'm going to learn how to, book gigs, manage gigs, meet new people, spreading laughter.
What's your process for writing jokes?
So I write like literally every day if I can. The process for writing jokes, like I just have stuff that just pops up in my head that I have to write down, that I feel like needs to be written down. And then also I just go over everything I wrote and then blend it and put it together. Um, like I said, I have jokes all over my place. It's ridiculous. But so my process is to just clear my mind, think about random stuff or stuff that I've seen on television, social media platforms, things that I've seen in my neighborhood, or things that I recognize at my job. So that is my process of writing. Clear head, clear mind, um, and just write. I don't like to write when I'm under a lot of stress, but some of my good jokes come from when I'm stressed out, which is unfortunate, but it works. And it's weird. But so that's my process. Clear mind, clear headed, and just writing. Just let my mind be creative and just write down everything that just comes to my mind and put it in order from there.
What's the most important thing for a stand up comedian to remember?
Remember your jokes. Also be humble. And then also remember that it's for the people, making the people laugh. And like I said, being humble in what you're doing in this industry. And then just be thankful for the negative or the positive feedback that you get to improve on your comedy. And to remember that either this could be a make or break, either you can go all the way with this or you can just be stagnant and, and not go anywhere if you don't link up with the right people or do your correct research or just try different venues or different avenues. So the most important things to remember is that, you have control of the mic, you know, also it's also your crowd and your fans are important, and building network is important.
What do you think are the best techniques for dealing with hecklers?
Make a joke about the heckler, also join the heckler as well. So it's like, oh my god, your mama, she's fat and she get a bowl of dicks. Well, I know my mom's fat because she had me, and as far as a bowl of dicks, I don't even think she's seen them. So it's a lot of ways you can deal with a heckler. Either you can, apply to it, or you can ignore it, or you can just go along with it.
What do you think are the biggest mistakes that stand up comedians make?
The biggest mistakes, like I said, I watch a few comics do their shows. I watch a lot of open mics. And I think the biggest mistakes with some of them, I'm gonna just keep it in the amateur realm. I'm just keep it in the amateur realm because that's where I'm at now in this stage process. The biggest mistakes, I believe, it could be the grammar. I do it a lot where I know the next joke, but I feel like I'm searching for it. So I do a lot of cussing, or I say like, well, you know what I mean, in that way. But the biggest mistakes I believe comedians have these days, it just varies. It just depends on what comic you're looking at, or who you watching. Like I said, most upcoming comedians that I've seen, some of them rush through their jokes. Some of them might, prolong the joke too much, or it's too much going on in the joke. So as far as mistakes of what I've seen, I believe that would be it.
What is the best way to learn stand-up comedy?
The best way to learn is to get out on the stage, and then also just do your research. Look at old comedians, not on the premise of their jokes, but how they maneuver and how they talk in the mic, use the mic, how they, participate with the crowd. And then also check out new avenues, look at different platforms, join different groups on how to be a best comedian. Also, having those peers within that comedy field helps out a lot. And basically, just putting yourself out there. More and more learning your own technique as far as a comic. Learn what's good and what's best, what you think is good and what you think is not working as far as the crowd wise. But just putting yourself out there, doing research, seeing what the comedy industry about, joining different social platforms. That what seems to be working for me in comedy groups, online things, even online Zoom classes, that helps out a lot. So anything that has anything to do with comedy, just get on the bandwagon. Either you're going to learn from it or you're not.
What do you think is the best way to improve as a stand-up comedian?
If you're filming yourself like I do, I have a YouTube page. So I tend to look at all of my jokes or my stand-ups I have done, that kind of give me a reaction of the crowd of what jokes work and what don't work. The best way to improve is just to get on that stage and see what works and what does not work, and just be open and receptive if it does or if it doesn't work.
What has stand-up comedy taught you about yourself?
Well, it has taught me to humble myself. And then also it has taught me to get over fears of talking in public with people. And then also it gives you a chance to be more in tune with yourself, because sometimes your best jokes is personal jokes. So my motto is the I always say the real shit is the funny shit. So just being real and true to myself, and it has just taught me I'm more confident. I always been confident, but I'm more confident with speaking in a variety group of people or a crowd. So I'm not nervous about that. It gave me confidence in believing that whatever I say, if I position it or if I word it right, it can be funny. And then also just believing in myself. You have to believe in yourself before anything. And like I said, it taught me to be humble. It taught me how to manage a crowd, how to make people focus more on you versus whatever they're doing, drinking or whatever, talking, socializing. And then also have a sense of control in that aspect.
What motivates you to keep performing stand-up comedy?
This crazy world that we live in, it's a joke. Um, America Inc. Corporation of America. And then also just everyday normal things that happen in my life that I feel like no one will understand, or unless I tell a joke about it. And it because I have a point to prove in the comedy in my stand-ups. And me being a creative being, I love to write. I love hearing people laugh. That what motivates me. Hearing a group of people laugh is like the best high you can ever get in your life. And that's what motivates me, to keep on going. And also my following is going up since I've been doing this. So that's a good thing. But just meeting new people, creative people like myself, and shit that just go on every day. It's hilarious. So that's what keep me motivated.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about doing stand-up comedy?
Go with your gut. If you feel it and you got the niche, go for it. Also do your research and be confident in what you're writing. Be confident in your jokes and just make sure you prepared. Show up on time to your gigs, and also being relevant and persistent in what you're doing. Have to be relevant. Always, if you have an opportunity or if it's a piece of opportunity, always take that opportunity, no matter if it's good or bad. At least you put yourself out there, and just be confident in yourself and just know, like, hey, look, this is some shit people just don't know about that's going on. But just be confident in your jokes and be confident in yourself and be humble, because it's really not a quick come up. You have to continue to work, and you have to continue to work. You have to continue to be better than the next person, especially as female comedians. You have to be better than a man. And then also, if you're an African American comedian, you have to be better than the man or the Caucasian woman next to you. So you just have to keep pushing, no matter what the barriers or anything is. Know that you're funny, know that your jokes work, and then also learn how to have structure in your jokes. Get tips if you can. Some people are not keen on giving tips regarding how they do this comedy thing, but some people are. Even if they give you a little snippet, just go from there, and then just be confident in what you're doing, and know that, hey, look, this can be an opportunity for me where I can just really make a living. But don't get into it thinking that you're going to come up really fast. That's not going to happen. But if you take your time and you continue to hit any avenue, anything dealing with comedy, jump on it, even if it's a competition, even if it's a class, whatever it got to do with comedy to get yourself out there, that would be the best way to go.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we did not cover?
I believe one question should have been asked was, where do you see yourself in comedy probably in the next, let's say 5, the lowest 2? And how would you prepare yourself to get to that goal? Or what is your end game in this comedy industry? Like, when you have did so many shows, when is your cutoff? Like, when is your cutoff? My future cutoff is when I get a residency at Las Vegas. That's my cutoff. That's what I'm striving to. So another question is, what are you striving for in the industry? What are you looking for to make this longevity?
I've been your host, Rob Chaffee. Don't forget to laugh today. It's good for you. Comedy Reset Spotlight is a podcast that brings you today's freshest and funniest comedy creators. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to hear more.